All right, guys, this thing just showed up early, which makes for a really good day. I was not expecting it.
What's in the box?
Needless to say, I'm really excited because this is going to be one of the sickest parts for the car yet. I'm excited to open it up and show you guys what it is. Now, obviously, you guys already know what's in the box. You have the power of foresight thanks to the title and the video thumbnail. But on the other hand, I'm just eager to work my way through all of this extensive packaging that's protecting what's inside. Without question, it's one of the most well-packaged things I've ever bought. I worked very carefully to cut free all of the packaging to reveal this. Obviously, it's a carbon fiber and aluminum intake plenum, or intake manifold. It's built by PracWorks out of Malaysia, and I was turned on to this unit by my buddy Amir and his K20 Turbo NSX. He's running this same manifold on his setup, and he's seen some really good results and gains in power from it, so I was eager to try it out for myself. Not to mention the fact that this thing looks absolutely incredible. I mean, just look at it. Now, I custom ordered this one with a few special details. I wanted matte carbon instead of gloss, and normally all of the aluminum on this thing comes anodized red, and I prefer the more clean and simple look of raw aluminum with a clear anodize on it, so I opted for that. This thing comes with all sorts of extras like a billet fuel rail, and it's priced very reasonably. At retail, which I paid, including my customization, this thing cost $1,800, which is a steal in contrast to a carbon plenum for something like a BMW. Last but not least, I know some of you guys are going to wonder if this thing will hold up to the extreme boost pressures that we're going to be running. And the guys at PracWorks tell me this thing is rated for 70 psi of boost pressure and tested up to 150. I love how light this thing is. It's friggin' awesome. This is such a sick piece. I'm beyond excited about it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to unbolt the factory manifold in the Ferrari and bolt this on. One, because I kind of want to see it in place, even though the engine bay is pretty ugly at the moment, and the motor that we have in there, the mock-up motor, is not the final motor. But more important than that, playing dress up, is I custom ordered this without finding out in any way, shape, or form if it's even going to fit. I like to live on the edge. Sometimes you got to take a gamble. This thing was sick. I had to buy it. Now we got to find out if it's going to clear the firewall. I think that it will, but you never know. Let's find out. Here you can see the factory intake manifold and how it curves down towards the block. And the new one doesn't do that. Now we've got a lot of room to the firewall, obviously, but there's no telling if this thing's actually going to fit. I didn't find any dimensions of the manifold before I bought it. I'm just feeling confident. I set up 2 cameras on this while I took the intake manifold off, which, as you guys would probably guess, wasn't too much of a challenge. All of the top bolts were easily accessible, and it's nice to know that that will remain the case with the new one. At least the top bolts were easy, but I guarantee you've never seen anybody remove the bottom bolts of this manifold quite like this. I'd like to say that this access hole was intentional, and we can call it a feature instead of an accident, but I'm glad it was there. I had no idea where the bolts were, and I needed this to actually see what I was doing. I don't expect to have this kind of access later down the line once the whole car is assembled. I imagine there will be some stuff in the way, but it was nice for the time being. I will say it was interesting removing the intake manifold because I've yet to really work on this engine while it's in the engine bay. This was a really good kind of example to tell me what it's going to be like to work on this car once the car is fully assembled. Granted, it is higher up off the ground than it will be when it's finished, but it's a lot of car to lean over and actually work on. Once I got the manifold off, I had to remove one of the studs, which we'll have to convert to a bolt in order to put the new manifold into place. It wouldn't quite clear all of the kind of extra accessories. But with that off, I'm happy to say the manifold clears the firewall with a lot of room. Here it is in its mounted state, and I'm really excited about how this is looking. The motor that we have in the car right now is a mock-up motor. It's not the final one we'll be using, so it is a bit ugly, as is the rest of the bay, but man, does this look good. And when paired with the turbo manifold and the turbo, this whole setup is pretty sweet. I'm also happy to know that it's functional too. This isn't just a pretty part. I've seen it on track, and it works. All right, so we know this thing performs really well because Amir has one on his K20 NSX, and he saw really good results out of it, which is part of why, well, most of why I bought this one, because I know that it works. Obviously, it looks incredible, but I'm also curious if we're gonna save some weight. I mean, it's light, but it's not featherweight. There's a lot of aluminum here. The factory manifold is all aluminum, and pretty much most aftermarket manifolds are gonna be constructed very similarly and probably weigh pretty close to what a stock manifold weighs, maybe minus a couple pounds. So let's put these on the scales and see if we're gonna save any weight. I started out with weighing the carbon intake manifold, which tipped the scales at 9.2 pounds or 4.2 kilograms for everyone else in the world. On the other hand, the aluminum intake manifold came in at 16 pounds, which isn't a huge weight difference. I'd wager that a sheet metal aluminum intake manifold is probably lighter than either of these. But this one looks good. Now, the only unknown that we have about this manifold right now is attaching our throttle body to it. This thing's got a number of different holes in it for different applications. I assume different Honda throttle bodies or popular aftermarket mounts. But I believe we're gonna be running a Bosch 80mm throttle body, a drive-by-wire throttle body, so that it will integrate with our standalone system and we'll have absolute control over everything and can do things like no-lift shifting with the transmission. But it might be kind of tricky. We might have to build an adapter that goes on this. I guess this is an excuse though. I want to find out what this dimension is. As said, I didn't really do a ton of research before I bought this thing. I kind of winged it. But to be honest, I like an excuse to use a tool, and I got a new tool. My buddy Gen did me a huge solid. He found out that I didn't have any digital calipers, which is kind of crazy. It's kind of a necessary tool for things. But I don't have any. And he bought me a set of Mitutoyo digital calipers. These things are sick, really nice, high-end calipers. I am ecstatic to have them. It was a huge surprise to have these show up here at the shop. And honestly, I just want an excuse to use them. So let's measure something. So it looks like we're at about 75 millimeters, give or take, which is pretty close, and if we build an adapter, we can probably bevel it and have a nice change in diameter. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's not a huge difference. I'm not gonna try to bore this out because it mates flush with the carbon here, and that seems like a dangerous idea, so we're gonna leave that. And with the manifold pressure we're gonna run, it's not gonna worry about forcing air through a 5mm different hole. But while we're at it, because I know some person out there is gonna say, hey, I'm curious about that manifold, will it work for me? So we can get this guy to balance here. I figure we can measure the intake ports on this thing and give you guys an accurate measurement. It looks like right at 50 millimeters, maybe 51. Yeah, 51 millimeters. I also don't know if you guys could see before, but these things mate very nicely inside with the carbon. I mean, it's a very impressive port match with the carbon runners. So pretty sweet. And there's definitely a lot of meat here. So if we wanted to, we could enlarge these ports to mate with the engine, but I don't think that that's necessary. So I mentioned in the last episode, I think it was the last episode, that I finally got some more parts on the way. Obviously the intake manifold showed up. We've got a fuel cell being built right now, a transmission on the way. But on that fuel cell note, I'm actually kind of excited looking at this now without an intake manifold in it. I haven't really seen it without the manifold in it before. How much room there is in front of the motor. It makes the motor look even smaller, and there's just a ton of space there. It looks like the fuel cell will be really easily accessible if the intake manifold is off, which I like a lot because the fuel pumps are going to be mounted kind of in and on top of that fuel cell. And I was kind of worried about, you know, if I've got to pull pumps out, do I got to pull the motor out, things like that. There's a small chance that the fuel cell will even go into the car with the engine in if I just pull the manifold and the alternator. Not that that's that important. I don't really mind having to pull the engine to put a fuel cell in and out of it. It's not like a serviceable part that I need to access very often. And it's not like pulling the engine on this thing is very difficult. Should be able to do it inside of an hour. But it's good to know that that opportunity might be there further down the line. I'm always trying to think about how will this car be to work on, what kind of hurdles will I face if certain parts break, or if I need to access certain places. So being able to get to those fuel pumps without too much work, you know, 6 bolts on the manifold, I'm into that. I like that a lot. So All right. I know I'm carrying on way too much about intake manifolds and you guys don't care that much. I just felt like this part was so cool I needed to make an episode about it. I've been eager for this thing to arrive. Although I have to say this thing showed up really quick. I think I ordered it like 2 weeks ago and it was custom ordered. So bravo to PracWorks. It shipped really quickly and showed up. It's beautiful. I love this thing. It's awesome. But with that said, this episode's a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you as always for watching and for the support. Come back on Tuesday as always. I've got another episode in the works. This one's going to be different. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. But it's going to be a lot of content in one episode, I'll tell you that. So I'll catch you guys then. Thanks as always.